Welcome into today's show, everybody. You're watching the Packers Report. I'm your host, Joey Peterson. And on today's show, we got my second mock draft of the offseason. Just like last time, we're going through all 7 rounds. I'm telling you what I would do, who I would pick if I was Goody, if I was LaFleur. And these were the options that I were presented. And if you like these mock drafts, just let me know by hitting that thumbs up button, okay? I love doing them for you guys. Last Sunday, it did really well. Views, likes, comments, all that. And all those metrics. And so if you guys like me doing them, let me know by hitting that thumbs up button. I'll keep them rolling every single Sunday until you guys stop watching them, okay? But in the meantime, make sure you guys like today's video. Send me that message, and we'll get started with today's show. So let's look at the draft picks that Green Bay has. They've got 8 of them. Got a nice little comp pick in round 7. They got the 23rd overall in round 1, then the 55 in round 2, 87 in round 3, and then you finally get to the day 3 picks, of which they have 5 of them. Going into this draft, I believe that the Green Bay Packers have 3 biggest needs, okay? Pass rusher, cornerback, and wide receiver. And honestly, I think wide receiver and cornerback can switch, okay? Next time I show this graphic, I probably should just switch them because I think wide receiver is easily number 2. But in my opinion, no other need is higher than the need for edge rusher. And that's why in round 1 at pick 23, I went Mykel Williams, defensive lineman, defensive end, pass rush specialist out of the University of Georgia. I saw him there. I couldn't believe it, and I had to take him. And I'll be honest with you guys. If Mykel Williams is there at pick number 23, my head will explode, okay? It'll be disgusting. There'll be my brains all over the screen, all over the camera. You'll probably have to click away, but that's just how special this guy is, in my opinion. If you look at Mel Kiper's big board, he actually has Mykel Williams as the second highest graded outside linebacker in the entire draft. He has him above guys who we've talked about before, Mike Green, James Pierce Jr., even Donovan Izuraku, who we talked about in my last mock draft, okay? So if Mykel Williams is the guy who falls to 23, then I'm wasting 0 time. As soon as the Packers are on the clock, I'm making the call, I'm turning in the card, and Mykel Williams is getting that green and gold jersey in a split second. And when you look at the stats, guys, it's not really even like a question of why, okay? Now, he doesn't have quite the numbers as you'd expect a guy to be this highly thought of, right? But it's just what he does on that defensive line, even battling through injury this past year. He's had an incredibly consistent career at the University of Georgia, playing at least 12 games in each of his last 3 seasons. He's had 5 sacks this last year, along with 26 pressures. And this team needs a game-changing pass rusher, but also I think it's important to think of a guy who can help you out in the pass rushing aspects of a football game, but also be a really big help in the run game as well. And that's what Mykel is, okay? I think he's the best all-around pass rusher in this draft. There are guys, best all-around defensive end in this draft. There are guys that are better at getting to the quarterback, but I don't think there's anybody that's as good at getting to the quarterback and in the run game as Mykel Williams is. And look at who just won the Super Bowl. The Philadelphia Eagles, and half, probably more, of their defense is Georgia Bulldogs. Okay, so I'm fine going Georgia round 1 with Mykel. Grade the pick for me down below in the comment section. A, B, C, D, or F. Heck, you can use pluses. You can use minuses. I don't care. Just let me know in the comment section down below. A little bit of a disclaimer, I'm going to go ahead and go wide receiver in the next 2 rounds based on the 2 guys that were available in the 2nd and the 3rd, okay? So we're just going to go ahead and jump all the way to the 3rd round, and in round 2, I picked Savion Williams, wide receiver out of TCU with the 55th overall, and then in round 3, pick number 87, give me Tre Harris, wide receiver out of Ole Miss. And you can find Savion Williams on Mel Kiper's number 6 ranking in his wide receiver draft rankings. You won't find Tre Harris there. If I had to guess, if I had to imagine, I would say that Tre Harris was probably right outside of that top 10. But man, like those 2 wide receivers, if those 2 guys are available at round 2 and at round 3, with the wide receiver talent, the wide receiver room in the shape that it is right now in Green Bay, like I'm not thinking twice about picking either of those guys. And Williams is kind of similar to Mykel in the fact that the stats don't necessarily jump off the page to you. There's guys who have more yards. There's guys who have more touchdowns. There's guys who have less drops. But with the size that he has, I think his ceiling is incredibly high. And if you could get him in the second round, bring him in, be that big body wide receiver to replace Christian Watson, then that's a no-brainer. And then even if you add on to that, right, you get Savion in the second, and then you get to the third, you have a chance to get a guy like Tre Harris, who, if I'm being frank, if I'm being honest, if Harris is available late in the second and Williams isn't, I'm taking Harris then as well, okay? Just look at the production. Over his last 3 seasons, he put up 1,000 yards in 8 games. Over 100 yards a game with 7 touchdowns. The 2 years previous, he almost had 1,000 yards. There isn't a wide receiver in this draft that's had as much production in his college career than Tre Harris. And what I love about both these guys, right, I talked about it a little bit already with Savion Williams, is they're both big-bodied wide receivers, okay? And with Christian Watson being out most likely for what? 7, 8, 9, 10 weeks of this next season, probably, honestly, 12, I'd say at the minimum, you need a guy to replace him. You need a guy to replace not only his production, but just the type of receiver that he is. And when you look at the wide receiver room, he's very different than a guy like Jaden Reed, than a guy like Romeo Doubs, right? You need some guy to throw in there in that starting wide receiver depth chart like a Williams or like a Tre Harris that have similar traits to Christian Watson, and I believe those two guys have incredibly high ceilings in this league. So if you agree with me, if you think the Packers should draft a wide receiver, hell, I took them consecutively in round 2 and round 3 because that's how badly I believe this team needs a little bit of depth in that position. If you agree with me, go ahead, show me by liking today's video. Coming up, we got 5 more draft picks to get into. Okay, we're going to look at rounds 4 through 7. Remember, 2 picks on round 7. I'm not going to go as in-depth on these selections, but you're still going to get to know every single person I'm picking starting in round 4. Give me Ahmed Hassanein, or Hassanein. I'm sorry, Ahmed. I might be butchering that. But round 4, pick 123. Give me the edge rusher out of Boise State. It's obvious the shortcomings that I believe this team has going into 2025, right? The 2 most biggest, I say, positions of need, kind of like I talked about at the top, is edge rusher and wide receiver. That's why I'm going those 2 positions in each of the first 4 rounds. But, man, just kind of like with Mykel, I think he's a really well-rounded edge player, okay? His pass rush grade is 76.9. He has amazing run defense grade of 80.3. His pass rush win rate is 16.1%. That would have rated him like 12th in the NFL this past year. 10 sacks, 25 hurries. And when it comes to Ahmed, I think he's a guy that you don't necessarily expect to come in here in year 1, be just this dominant force in the National Football League. But he's a guy I think can be a great depth piece and who I think with a couple years of work, maybe even just one of shadowing what it's like to be an edge rusher in the NFL, getting him in an NFL weight room, getting him with his NFL teammates and that staff, I think his ceiling's incredibly high and he can skyrocket after his rookie year. Let's talk offense, okay? Offensive line specifically. Give me Colby, guard out of the University of Iowa in round 5, pick number 160. And what I love so much about Colby is he's a guy that is incredibly durable, okay? And that's very rare, I would say, with a guy of his size and just offensive lineman in general. But he's played over 2,000 snaps in the last 3 seasons. He played right guard in 2023 and 2024, but has shown he can play left guard, and he's only allowed 6 sacks in the last 3 years, okay? And let's have an honest conversation about this Packers offensive line. Nobody's worried about the tackles. Nobody's worried about the outside, right? But I think a lot of us, myself, producer Dylan included, we all know that this interior could use a little bit of work. It could use a little bit of depth. And Colby's not a guy who I think will come in here and year 1 be the starter. But he's a guy kind of like Ahmed, which I expect to take a jump or 2 after year 1 or year 2 in this team. Let's go back to defense in the secondary mostly. Give me cornerback Jaylin Smith out of the University of Southern California, round 6, pick number 199. And I want to preface this by saying I'm taking a cornerback late in this draft because I'm hopeful that there is a free agent signing. Okay, we've talked a lot of Travarius Ward. We've talked a lot of DJ Reed. And so I'm hopeful that this Packers team will sign a free agent. It doesn't, and so that makes it not as high as a draft need, and so you can take a cornerback late. And if you're getting a guy at this late who's doing these numbers when it comes to PFF grades that Jaylin Smith is, I think that's a massive win. He had an 82.5 coverage grade, an 82.7 man coverage grade, and a run defense grade of 80.1. I truly think if you could get him at that late round and pick number, what is that, 6? I think that might be the steal of the draft, okay? He's a guy who's been at USC for a very long time, meaning he's seen a lot of change when it comes to his defensive role, when it comes to defensive scheme, when it comes to defensive coordinator, and he was still able to put up those numbers when it came to PFF grades. So if you get him on a team in a consistent scheme, gosh, I think he can do a lot of great things at this next level. If you think Green Bay adds a cornerback over the next couple months, how do you think it happens? Do you think it's by the draft, or do you think it's in free agency? Give me a D or give me an FA in the comment section down below. Let's go back to offensive line, shall we? Because we got Joshua Gray, guard out of Oregon State, our first pick of our round 7 selections at number 239. He's got a lot of pros. He's got a lot of cons, right? You got to take the good with the bad when you're in this 7th round. And honestly, when you're drafting any offensive lineman past like the 4th round, he's incredibly athletic. He's got a really high motor. Okay, those are 2 incredible things about him. Those are 2 things that I think will translate very well when you talk about playing in that next level. However, he struggles a decent bit with the power rush, okay? He has a tendency to get overmanned, to get overstrengthed, if that's even a word. And then he can also get a little bit lungy at times, which as an interior offensive lineman, if you get a little lungy, you lose all of your leverage, okay? With all that being said, I think if you get him at pick number 239, I think that's really, really good value for what his ceiling is. Last up, we got Greg Penn III. Linebacker out of LSU, pick number 251. And I don't want to say like I took a flyer with this one, but I'm really excited with this pick, okay? If Greg Penn falls all the way to that pick in that round, I'd be thrilled. I'd take him. I don't think he will, because I think he's going to be a guy that gets to the combine and just tests absolutely absurd. And I think he's going to shoot a little bit up boards. I don't think he's going to go to like the 4th, 5th, maybe not even the 6th round. I think he's going to be an early round 7 selection, maybe even a late 6th rounder. But man, he's a tackling machine. He's gotten over 80 tackles in each of his last 2 seasons. He's incredibly durable, and he's just a really consistent player and has been for the LSU defense for a really long time. And I know that this team doesn't necessarily need a ton of help when it comes to linebackers, right? We all know who the starters are. We all know they're not going anywhere. But if you get Penn as a depth piece who you could also flex as an edge rusher, he's got kind of a little bit of that Micah Parsons-ness to him. I'm using a lot of words that probably aren't even words in today's episode. But still, he's very, very dynamic when it comes to what he can do on the defensive side of the football. How would you feel with this draft, okay? Say we're sitting here, it's April 26th, it's 10 o'clock, round 3's over, these are the selections, how would you feel? Let me know, H for happy, M for mad in the comment section down below. Thanks so much for watching today's video. Make sure you guys hit that subscribe button. We got mock drafts coming all off season long until the draft starts, and if you like this video, if you love the mock drafts, make sure to give me a thumbs up.